Welcome everybody to another Lord Meher book reading. It's Thursday night, India, and I'm so happy that you all could make it to the Zoom meeting and to everybody else who joins in for the recording. So maybe we can just close our eyes for a minute and just be in silence and connect with Baba. And slowly, gently, you may choose to keep your eyes closed and listen or open them. I'm going to read today from page number 1717. It, we're talking about the film projects and his work in India. He's quite right in his way of thinking, but absolutely wrong as a fact. In our case, where I, being a spiritual master, holding the keys to the three worlds, have to act in accordance with certain laws of the material world when I work with people of the world. In short, his mind would be at once prejudiced, his ideal would be shocked, and the impression destroyed. I would not ordinarily care for 1,000 such shattered impressions, but in this particular case where I have to deal with or through him for certain work of mine, I have to see that his present impression is kept up and not at all disturbed through any act on our part. That is why I quietly tolerate all this grave danger and utilize other means at whatever inconvenience to myself and even to you. I have to call Jamadar all the way from Mehrabad, incurring so much additional expenses of his railway. Sorry, I just got lost. Can someone guide me where it is?
Railway fare. That is the seventh line from bottom.
Okay. Okay, maybe you can read Meher Kiran. I'm just a bit confused.
So I will reread from the para there. That is why I quietly tolerate all this grave danger and utilize other means at whatever inconvenience to myself and even to you. I have to call Jamadar all the way from Mehrabad, incurring so much additional expenses of his railway fare, board, and lodging, over and above his pay. When every pie is so precious to us, I have constantly marked this peculiar trait in the character of Indians, their lack of discrimination, as against this particular trait in the character of people in the West, where they always discriminate. In India, people will easily and readily believe and have faith in saints and masters. It is a general tendency of this country, mostly without preliminary discrimination, as to the status or qualification of the saint. But this fate of theirs will last only so long as their pet ideals and prejudices are not disturbed. The moment these have a cause of disturbance, they will not try to think or discriminate as to why a certain word or act was found necessary and what were the conditions or circumstances, etc., that made it necessary. The moment these ideals are disturbed, they are shattered and mostly destroyed, which means their faith and devotion for the saint are also shattered and destroyed. In the West, it is different. First of all, they will not easily come in and put faith in anyone, however great spiritually, unless they are convinced of something in him that they did not find in others or hear about. And then, after once having placed their faith in such a person, they will not easily give it up. They would readily think and discriminate over things they do not understand about him before forming their opinion otherwise. And unless they have very substantial reasons that justify their action after such discrimination, they will not give him up. In short, they will not be easily prejudiced one way or the other and use their discrimination always before or after accepting one as a saint or master. If there was a case like ours in the West, I would not hesitate to explain the situation to the person because I know he would use his discrimination and could digest and accept when my explanation was duly given. Whereas a person in India, however educated, would very rarely do this due to difference in ideals, the ways of thinking, and certain traits of character. In India, people with a very firm and staunch faith in a master, such as myself, would at once start thinking and would react with prejudice. If I were to go to a cinema or certain places of amusement or recreation, whereas in the West, people would, on the contrary, almost forcibly take me to the movies or theaters in such places. But those persons in Europe or America would use the discrimination and see nothing wrong in a master who works on the physical plane going to places of amusement or recreation. Whereas those in India would not tolerate for a moment such an idea due to the rigid ideals and prejudices that saints or masters have nothing at all to do with things of the world, much less with amusements and entertainments. And one who would do this, visit cinemas or theaters, could never be a spiritual being, much less a saint or a master. So, also, in many other things of daily routine regarding food and clothes, modes and manners of living, etc., for which people in India have certain very rigid ideals as to the lives and activities of saints being always in caves, mountains, or in ashrams situated in very secluded places away from towns or cities. Those saints must have a certain appearance with a beard and long hair, or be clean shaven all over like swamis. They must have a certain type of dress, long robe, white or orchard colored kafnis, and they must not eat or drink certain things. They must live mostly on milk and water or fast. The more abstinence, the greater the spiritual dignity and advancement. They must know the religious scriptures, the Shastras of Hindus, Sufic, and other literature of Mohammedans. They must also do certain yogic practices or asanas. Life in their ashrams must be regulated and disciplined under certain rigid rules for all alike. All this is in
Thank you,
accordance.
Kiran. Eva, could you read now?
Sure. All this is in accordance with certain pet ideals and prejudices preliminary formed by each individual from what he has been taught and brought up with from the beginning. It is all from what he has formed after reading a certain type of literature or after coming in contact with certain saints or masters or cults with a very narrow margin for other ideals, however better or greater, to creep in and prejudice or affect these already formed and rigidly established. This is all right and not very difficult for those of the spiritually advanced saints, yogis, swamis, walis, peers, and even sadgurus who have to work in a certain circle or sphere and prepare their own circle of following according to the ideals and teachings formed by their surroundings. But where a great avatar has to work on a worldwide scale for bringing on a spiritual revival and upheaval all over the world, the scope and dimension of work is very wide, full of varieties according to the people, place, and circumstances. Sometimes with an avatar, one work is quite at variance with another, although leading toward the same spiritual ideal and goal of humanity. While doing such work for the world as a whole, the master, even the avatar, although God realized and having infinite knowledge and power, has to succumb to the weaknesses and prejudices of those of his disciples and followers whom he tries to bring out of these very weaknesses and prejudices, and also to utilize them to help in his work for the spiritual upliftment of humanity. That is why all this persuading business on my part, so often marked and misunderstood by you. That is also why I have to regulate my life and work physically according to the laws of the human body, physics, to maintain this medium or vehicle for the work I have to do, and also according to social or religious customs and laws in different places among various people. It is because of the work I have to do for the world. Otherwise, if I had no worldwide duty, why should I care to tolerate and put up with your 101 weaknesses and prejudices, and keep pampering one or the other almost continually, which causes the annoyance of others around, and to the greatest annoyance and suffering to myself? That is the reason why with the Hindu, I have to be and act as a Hindu, Brahmin, or even untouchable. With the Muslim, I act as a Muslim. With the Parsi, as a Parsi. With the Christian, I act as a Christian, and so forth. Not for any other reason or object of my own, but for the sake of my duty and work to bring you all out of the bindings of Maya, and thereby enable you to rise above religious and other prejudices and eventually realize the self within, which you fools are seeking externally in the endless rounds of birth and death. As Vivekananda has rightly expressed, the real teacher is he who comes down to the level of his students. For you fellows, I have to come down from my spiritual infinity to the level of this material world, where you are all groping ignorantly in the dark in search of happiness, which you cannot and would not ever find without the help of one who has found it, and who can lead you to it. Shanji had mentioned the same theme in a letter from Mysore to Charles Purton, dated 4 March 1936. Baba does and will manage things in his own ways, in spite of all the opposition of Maya, or of all that the world would say or write, or even if his own devotees wouldn't understand. For he alone knows what he does, which is always for the good of the individual or of the group, although most invariably misunderstood and misjudged by a world that judges his actions with a limited mind. One of the men Mandali had to stay awake on guard duty at the women's bungalow to guard against the possibility of thieves and miscreants throwing stones and damaging the Tata compound. Jamadar, Vishnu's mother Kakubai, and Murli arrived on the evening of 18 April to help with matters in Mysore. Masaji had also come. This left Pendu, Padri, Adi Sr., Sidhu, Meher's mother Dolatmai, and Gulmai's daughter Dolly as the only residents still living at Meherabad. And footnote, Rao Sahib had been at Meherabad, but he left and stayed in Bombay for some months. After some time, Dolatmai went to stay with her daughter, Freni, and her family in Nasik, but later moved back to the family quarters. The doctor had permitted Mani to go for a drive every afternoon to speed her recovery. So Baba accompanied her most afternoons with Jalbai and Shanji and Tukaram driving. A few evenings, Bao Sahib and Jalbai entertained Baba with humorous skits. And here's a picture from Mysore, 1936. On 23 April 1936, Baba mentioned Vivekananda again in reference to Deshmukh's recently released book, My Master and His Teaching. Baba said it would appeal to those who have heart. Baba added, devotees of Krishna are interested in his life, but pundits are only interested in Vedanta and the Gita. The Gita and Vedanta are very good indeed, but they only touch the head, whereas the life of Krishna touches the heart. Vivekananda's best work is My Master, though it is a slim volume. Why? Because it was written with love. Other of his works are more intellectual. And footnote, My Master is taken from a lecture delivered by Vivekananda in New York in 1896 about his guru, the perfect master, Ramakrishna Paramhansa.
Thank you, Eva.
You're
Marvin,
welcome.
could you read, Marvin?
Yes.
Yep. Discussions with the Mandali, wryly referred to as cabinet meetings, were being held daily about Baba's future plans and where to establish ashrams for his Indian women, Mandali, and some of the Westerners he intended to call. On the 24th, the idea of erecting a new building with a tower on Meherabad Hill was proposed as a tower or minaret would look more prominent on a hill rather than at Lower Mirabai, and be a more secluded residence for the Eastern women. The next day, a letter came from Ramju in Nasik stating that Naval Talati had had a heart attack and was seriously ill. Referring to Naval, Baba observed, "He loves me with all his heart and has stuck to me since the days of Manzil Amin." Baba added, "I love all and I love none. I think I ought to be with Naval now, but Mysore is so far away from Bombay, where Naval was. It is not easy to travel so far." 2 telegrams were then sent concerning Naval, one to Ramju and another to Naval's family in Bombay, through Adi Sr., who alone knew Baba's address in Mysore, instructing them to wire Baba daily for 3 days concerning the progressive condition of Naval's health. On Sunday, April 26, 1936, Baba took an evening walk for the first time since moving to Mysore with Vishnu, Kalamana, Mama, and Chanji. The next day, a discussion among the men Mandali took place about the interplay of good and bad actions in life, whereupon Baba stated, there is really nothing like good or bad. As good is necessary, likewise, bad is also necessary, like positive and negative. Both are equally essential for action and evolution. If only good were to prevail everywhere, life would end and become extinct. Both good or bad done to the extreme world, to the extreme, would lead to self-realization. For instance, absolute bad with no trace of good, or absolute good with no trace of bad at all, both are equally conducive to the attainment of the goal of self-realization. If this is so, naturally it can be asked, why is good preferable to bad? Both good and bad are zero, being non-existent for those who are realized. Both are terms of duality. Next page. Okay. But the great masters and avatars give preference and advocate good over bad. This is only because good is really, spiritually speaking, easy for reaching the goal, though apparently, materially speaking, it is the reverse. For example, bad is apparently easy, difficult really, but the underlying principle in life being spiritual progress, true existence comes against the material progress, which is only apparent and not real. Thus, the masters advocate good, being truly easy for mankind, as the better standardized course to follow for true progress in the march of life to the goal. Another reason for preferring and advocating good is that in bad, although apparently easy, while thinking about and actually committing a bad act, there is always a sort of, quote, torture, unquote, to the mind, which inevitably happens after committing the act. For instance, illicit sex or murder. Whereas in good, which though apparently difficult, there is nothing of the kind, no torture to the mind. On the contrary, there is a constant feeling, a sort of happiness, not only in thinking, but also in doing a good act, although it is always more difficult, apparently, to do good rather than bad. Besides, pursuing the course of doing bad to the extreme, where am I? Would not succeed until the end. A man's body, however bold and different, healthy and robust, would not be able to withstand prolonged indulgence in bad vices, such as lust or drinking to the extreme. Therefore, bad to the extreme is not practical physically. On Saturday, 2 May 1936, Baba Gustaji and Chanji left Mysore by train to go to the shrine of the saint Baba Budan. They carried 13 large bundles of necessities, such as cooking utensils and a stove, their bedding, lanterns, and clothing. At about midday, they arrived at Asikiri, where they transferred to another train. They reached Kadur 2 hours later and took a local bus to Chikmagalur, where they stayed at the Dak bungalow. Before leaving Mysore, Baba had advised Chanji not to keep the lantern and stove filled with kerosene. But in his hectic preparation to depart, Chanji had forgotten to empty them according to Baba's warning. In the bus to Chikmagalur, the stove leaked onto Baba's mattress, soaking it with kerosene. When Chanji discovered this while unpacking in the Dak bungalow, he was frightened and put the bedding in the sun to dry, but the strong odor remained. When Baba found out, he was extremely perturbed by Chanji's carelessness, asking, "What did you do? Fill the stove?" Chanji stood silent, and Baba admonished him, "Be attentive to what I wish. Your small mistake has resulted in a catastrophe for me." They left Chikmagalur by the 8 o'clock bus the following morning for Baba Budan Mountain. The road was extremely rough, and after traveling some distance, the engine overheated and the radiator boiled over. Proceeding further, they found the forest dense and forbidding, and the steep ascent terrifying. With much difficulty, they reached Budan Nagar, a small village with a population of only 150 people. The driver advised them, "You better fill your canteens here because up on the mountain there is no water." Chanji filled their containers. During the bus ride, an elderly Muslim man had been staring at Baba. Quite taken by Baba's appearance, he said he wished to accompany Baba to the Dak bungalow on top of the mountain. But the bus driver refused to allow the man to ride along and made him get off, although Baba seemed to like the old man and did not object. Oh, where's my screen? Okay. Baba, Gustaji, and Chanji reached the Dak bungalow on the mountain and prepared to stay. Since water was going to be a problem, a servant was hired to fill a large vessel and carry water to them daily. Meanwhile, Baba himself cooked a potato dish and prepared chapatis. After their meal, he sat in seclusion in the bungalow for 1 hour from 2:45 to 3:45 p.m. He kept Chanji and Gustaji on watch outside at a distance, with instructions to allow no one to come toward the bungalow. But while Baba was engaged in his inner work, the hired man was seen bringing the water up the mountain. Chanji could not shout to him, since that would have disturbed Baba, so he signaled to him to stay away. But the man could not follow what he meant, and Chanji quietly walked to him and told him to put the water down and leave. Chanji picked up the heavy container and began to struggle slowly back toward the bungalow. But then he heard Baba clapping. With a great effort, he rushed up the hill. When he reached the bungalow, Baba immediately expressed his displeasure. "I have been clapping, and you are coming only now?" Chanji was exhausted and panting from the hike back. He could barely utter "Baba" in a vain attempt to explain. "What is it?" Baba smiled, but Chanji could not speak. Finally, after catching his breath, Chanji was able to explain what had happened. Gustaji then made tea, but as milk was unavailable, they had to have it without milk. The next day, 4 May, Baba Chanji and Gustaji came down from Baba Budan Mountain and went to Chikmagalur. After a night there, they proceeded to Belur the following day. In Belur, too, Baba remained in a secluded spot for his work and left for Hassan on 6 May, where he likewise spent a period of time in seclusion. From Hassan, Baba returned to Mysore on the 7th after a hectic 5-day tour doing his seclusion work. Following the journey north a few days later, after returning to Mysore, Baba decided that he wanted to move his ashram headquarters. While holding a discussion with the Mandali about setting up an ashram in Mysore, Baba indicated that he now preferred to move to Rahuri, a rural forested place about 30 miles from Meherabad. He stated, "Since Rahuri is between Meherabad and Nasik, I can. The women will remain in Meherabad with some of them in Mandali, and the rest of the Mandali will stay in Rahuri. A small hut in Rahuri should be built for me." Baba assigned Kalamama the work of erecting huts in Rahuri for himself and a few of the Mandali, and instructed Daki to obtain a piece of land for the purpose. Baba also proposed that a trust be created for the maintenance of the women in Mandali. On Wednesday, 13 May 1936, Baba left Mysore for Nasik with Kalamama by train. Rustam met them in Pune and accompanied Baba to Bombay. On the 17th, Adi Sr. drove Baba to Nasik and from there to Rahuri, an isolated area that had been selected for establishing the ashram, and the land was leased for 5 years from a Marwari named Laxminarayan. The landowner was paid in full, and Baba instructed Kalamama about the proposed work. After a brief stay with the Mandali at Meherabad, Baba returned to Bangalore on the 22nd and was met by Chanji. While they were having tea at Spencer's Hotel, a Jain named Dwakadas, who worked for the Mysore state government, recognized Baba and stood before him with folded hands. Footnote:
The hotel is now known as the Taj West End. End of footnote.
They returned to Mysore the same day by train. Baba wanted to travel by third class, but Chanji persuaded him to go second class, which was much less crowded, and hence there would be less chance of his being recognized. And there we have a picture of Baba in 1936.
Okay.
Okay,
Maybe,
I'm a little yawn.
yeah. Maybe, oh, she's gone. Mahu's gone, is it? Okay. Ralph, can you read next?
Yes. I'm looking for the text.
Ralph, you are on mute and
I'll start reading until Ralph finds a place.
I
Okay?
got it.
So
No,
we
I
don't
did. I
read.
thought I was on.
Okay.
Sorry. I was reading away.
Oh, go ahead, Ralph.
Sorry. Considering all the hardships of late, to lighten Baba's mind, what mood Jalbai and Chanji tried to persuade him to go to an afternoon movie on Sunday, 24th May, 1936. Baba was reluctant to go to any movies due to the difficulties and awkward situations prevailing around the ashram in Mysore. But Jalbai and Chanji were determined that he should have some recreation. And at last, Baba agreed to go. Mysorean Maya was still at work, however. There was no electricity in the city. The movie was scheduled to start at 4 o'clock, and after waiting until 5:30, Baba decided to return to the ashram. They later learned that power had been restored and the movie had started minutes after they had left. Baba Baba's health was still delicate, and to make matters worse, on the way back, Tukaram misjudged a curve, and the car hit two large potholes, which severely aggravated Baba's sensitive system. He had to take several special remedies when they returned. Having having stayed in Mysore for 4 months, Baba made a permanent change and disbanded the ashram, departing by train with the men and women Mandali on the morning of the 30th May. They arrived in Pune the following day. Baba left for Meherabad in the afternoon with the women Mandali in Vithal. Boker's bus.
And there's a
Having trouble with the small print. I'm sorry. I better turn my.
Ralph, I can make it bigger for you. How's that?
Yes. However, it's too big for my screen. It's running off the screen. I'm trying to I turn the phone horizontally, but the text isn't following suit.
All right, why don't we read the footnote and somebody else could take over?
Yeah, I'll
Go
read
ahead. Yes. Okay.
Curiously, the Maharaja of Mysore's birthday was being celebrated on 30 May 1936, when thousands poured into the city to witness the festivities. End of quote.
I could pick it up for a while until somebody else is ready. During this period, Dr. Gandhi was residing with his family in Lonavla, his wife, 4 daughters, and 1 son. I didn't know he had so many children. Gandhi fell victim to a dishonest moneylender. Some property had been unscrupulously taken from Gandhi by fraud, and the man and his wife who had done this had been murdered on the same day. Gandhi was falsely accused of their murder, and he became so depressed that he decided to commit suicide. On the night of Wednesday, 3rd June, 36, Gandhi drank heavily and went to drown himself in Walvin Lake. But when he reached it, he felt dizzy and sat down, and then began thinking of his life. Disgusted with his plight, he started cursing the 3 spiritual masters he had known, Hazrat Babajan, Pasni Maharaj, and Meher Baba. He bitterly swore, "Of what use is Meher Baba to me when I am surrounded by difficulties on all sides, and he does not help me? What sort of power does he have, and what experience, quote unquote? He's supposed to know all, but following him is useless." Although Gandhi had fully intended to commit suicide, after venting his spleen, he was lulled to sleep by the cool breezes. Meanwhile, that very night, Baba became restless and suddenly left Meherabad early the next morning by car. Adi Sr. drove his Opel, and Neelu accompanied them. They drove first to Heligaon, where Baba assorted Amina and Abdullah Jaffar's difficulties. Then they went directly to Lonavla. When they reached Gandhi's house, he was not there, so they began searching for him. They came to the lake and found Ghani sound asleep on the bank. Baba awakened him. When Ghani saw Baba, he was amazed. He could not speak, and tears welled up in his eyes. What's the matter? Baba asked him. Stunned, Ghani haltingly murmured, Baba, I have abused you so much, yet you love me so much.
Marvin, I'll read from you. Thanks.
Okay.
Your abuse brought me here, Baba gestured. It was sweeter than nectar to me, compared to words of appreciation and praise from hypocrites. Curses from my lovers are much sweeter. Ghani burst out weeping, and Baba embraced him. Baba then had Ghani join them to visit Bombay, and they stayed at the Dada Chanji's for a day, where Sawak Kotwal and his brother came to see Baba, as did Big Khorshid, Baba's sister-in-law, and Kaka Sahib, keeping Ghani close at his side. Baba took him around the city and thus uprooted the refractory thoughts from his mind. Baba left for Nasik the next afternoon and returned to Mehrabad 2 days later on the 8th. Ghani accompanied them to Nasik, where he left for Lonavala to bring his clothes to Mehrabad for a few days stay there. Baba had sent his sister money to Bombay so that her ear could be properly treated. Footnote, please.
Mani most likely went to Bombay with Jalpai and Shanji from Pune on their way back from Mysore. End of footnote.
Yeah. Memo was living in Bombay at this time with Behram, Paureen, and their baby son. Mani was to stay with the family for 2 weeks and have the dressing on her ear changed when necessary. Jalbai stayed in Bombay to look after Mani and take her to her doctor appointments. The rental company in Bombay, where Memo, Behram, and Pardeen. Something you want to say, Marvin?
The rental complex.
Okay. Sorry, I don't know what I said, but I'll read that again. The rental complex in Bombay, where Memo, Behram, and Pareen resided, was called Banu Mansion. They lived there for approximately 6 months that year and for 6 months at another bungalow elsewhere in Bombay. It was a large bungalow, and Memo rented a cottage in the compound. Next page, please. Thank you. The house was located in Dadar, on the main road, almost directly opposite to Manzile M. Mean. Coincidentally, I a few months back went to see this place. Couldn't go inside, but I just saw it from outside, and the energy and was really peaceful out there. We could just see it from the outside. Yeah. Nauraji Dada Chanji and his family had resided in the rear of the main building prior to moving to their new home in Bowman Lodge. All the tenants of Banu Mansion were either Parsis or Iranis. It was well known that Shireen Mai, was Meher Baba's mother, and the other residents, being vehemently opposed to Baba, harassed her terribly, believing her son Meherban was committing heresy against the Zoroastrian religion by telling people he was a master. During this period, Dalumai's brother Colonel Irani continued to publish defamatory articles in Gujarati newspapers about Baba, misleading the Irani and Parsi community of Bombay with his baseless allegations. But there was also a group of Parsis and Iranis in Bombay, namely Dada Chanji, Katrak, Kotawal, Desai, Merchant, Baria, and pleader families who were staunch followers of Baba. No amount of propaganda could sway them. These families tolerated insults and mocking taunts from their own communities and became ostracized by them. It was their rock like faith in Meher Baba that made them hold to him. Thus, by facing such opposition, their love was tested. Memo was the main target of these antagonistic Zoroastrians, and she was troubled the most. While she was reading in while she was residing in Banu mansion, all her neighbors, except for a bachelor, approached the landlord and threatened to vacate the building if he failed to evict Shireen Mai. They even signed a petition to this effect. In those days, before there was such a overpopulation, housing was readily available in Bombay, and the landlord became worried by their threat. He approached Memo and told her that it was best if she left. Memo protested. Why? I pay the rent regularly. I harass and hurt no one. Why should I leave? The landlord did not have an answer to this and accepted that she was staying. Even though the tenants kept up their campaign to evict her, Memo was fearless and stuck to her resolve not to move. Through Baba's watchful nazar, matters worked themselves out in a wonderful manner. The man who was harrowing Memo the most was transferred and subsequently left Bombay. In another tenant's family, there was a death, and this tenant too had to leave to stay with his dead relative's family. Another lost his job. All the other tenants, except for the bachelor who had not taken part in deliberately causing trouble for Memo for one reason or another, moved out of the building within a month, and the Avtar's mother was left in peace. Memo was a courageous and bold woman. Because of her inner strength, she confronted the opposition straightforwardly. The same situation faced her in Pune, where she was constantly ridiculed wherever she went, but no harm came to her because of her intrepid nature. Her real strength was her belief in her son's divinity, and Baba's nazar was on her, which enabled her to face the bitter antagonism against him. After returning to Meherabad, Baba began commuting regularly between Rahuri and Nasik. He also went to Bombay to see money, which afforded his followers there an opportunity to see him. He would stay at Nauroji's residence and devotees would come for darshan. Even though Dada Chandji's family had grown close to Baba, during his visits, one thing bothered the children of the family. Sorry about the cycle ringing in the background. Bach, Bacha Mai would serve their meal would serve them their meal only after first serving Baba. The children complained that Baba's visits caused them trouble, mainly because they were hungry and did not get their food on time. Bacha Mai threatened to go tell Baba not to come to their house. But then the children pleaded with her not to do that because they loved to play with Baba when he came. At one point, they proposed that since Baba was such a fun, it would be better if he permanently stayed at their house. On occasion, Baba would visit the Dada Chandji's home unexpectedly without prior invitation. But Bachamai would lovingly accommodate and serve him and the Mandali with him. A remarkable woman, Bachamai lived only to keep Baba pleased at all times. At Meherabad, from the beginning of June 1936, Baba began experiencing spells of giddiness. Though he slept and ate normally and had no other symptoms, Gadekar came and saw Baba on 14th, and as did Manik Ranchi, Sarosh, and Dhake. Later, Baba went to see a movie at Sarosh Talkies with Neelu and Adi Senior. On the late afternoon of 22nd June, he returned to Nasik, accompanied by Rustam, Pendu, and Vishnu. Chanji was also there, having been called from Bombay. Baba went to see Nawal and Dina Talati and eased Dina's concerns about her husband's poor health. Dr. Deshmukh had come from Nagpur with his wife Indumati and their newborn daughter Sanjeevani. The family met Baba at Rustam's on 23rd morning and spent the day with him. Deshmukh was overjoyed to see Baba after a year. Baba advised him, "Remain in the world, but be not of it. Your wife is well educated and beautiful. Your baby is also beautiful, and you're lucky to have such a wife and child. Both of you together can do much toward my work, and if you do it, you will not belong to this world." Baba left Nasik for Bombay by train early in the morning of Wednesday, 24th June, along with Janji, Pendu, and Ramju. In Bombay, he met his mother, Behram, Mani, and Big Khorshid and gave instructions about Mani's treatment. Gulmai too had been brought to Bombay for a kidney stone operation. Baba went to see her that day and the next at Dr. Mulgaokar's nursing home. The operation was success subsequently cancelled. On the 25th, Baba rode in a Victoria to Chanji's family residence where he had lunch. While Baba was there, Pleader came unexpectedly, but Baba did not see him. He went to Kotwal's new residence that night. Baba returned to Nasik on 26 June, accompanied by Pendu. Adi Senior had also come to Bombay, and he drove Gulmai and Neelu back to Ahmednagar. Baba visited Rahuri the next day and was back in Mehrabad on the 29th. An article appeared in the Marathi newspaper about Upasni Maharaj, quoting him as saying he intended to leave Sakori and retire to a jungle. Baba sent Adi Senior to Sakori on 2nd July 1936 with this message from Baba: "I have not been giving interviews for the past 1 year. 2 months ago, I decided to stay aloof from the Mandali and their routine by staying at Rahuri. The Mandali will stay at Mehrabad, the ladies on the Mehrabad hill, and the westerners at Nasik. Since I have already decided to retire into relative seclusion, why should you, Maharaj, also retire to a forest so late in your life? You should instead come and stay with me at Rahuri." Maharaj gave a non-committal reply. Footnote: You're muted, Eva. Anyway, I'll read that.
Okay,
Okay,
thanks.
you can read that.
Adi was sent back to Sikori a month later on 7 August 1936 with the same message. End of footnote.
Yeah, thank you. Janji arrived at Mehrabad at morning of 7 July. Along with Freni Masi, Ghani was also at Mehrabad. A white donkey named Champa was brought to Mehrabad, and on the 8th, Baba sat on it for the first time. Ghani had been specially called from Lonavala just to hold the reins and lead the donkey. It was a matter of amusement for the Mandali and provided them an occasion of merriment. Gustaji was fond of riding, and Baba once directed him to ride the donkey. No sooner did Gustaji climb onto its back than the donkey, instead of moving forward, went backwards. Gustaji did his best to bring it round, but it stubbornly kept going backwards and then threw Gustaji off. Laughing, all the other men ran to help him to his feet. And then we have a picture of Baba on a horse. I'm sure it's not the donkey though. Looks like a horse. Scroll down, please. Up. Baba's waving his hands out. Yeah, sitting on a horse. Mani had recovered from her ear operation by then and returned to Upper Mehrabad to join the other women. Mehra, Naja, Khurshid, Sunamasi, and Balu. Vishnu's mother, Kakubai, was living in Lower Mehrabad. At dusk one day in July, Mani took photographs of Baba on the donkey and of him with Mehra and the other women, Naja in turn, photographed Mani with Baba and the women. On 10 July 1936, Baba was driven by Adi Senior from Mehrabad to Rahuri and Nasik, along with Sidhu, Piroja, and her baby daughter Temi, who was to have a tonsillectomy in Nasik. Chanji, Kalingad, and a boy named Jalil followed by bus. Baba stopped in Rahuri on the way to check progress of the work there. Kali Mama had speedily taken up the work of erecting an ashram at Rahuri as instructed by Baba, and Baba would often visit the site. In Nasik, Baba visited Dina and Naval. Baba asked Naval how he felt. Seeing Dina's worried expression, Baba gestured. This is bad. One mustn't hold on to worries, no matter how sad or depressing, and keep them in the mind all the time. Brooding over them? Instead, take the worry from your mind, fling it out, and be free of it by occupying yourself in daily chores, in your usual routine. Because all this is nothing, zero, illusion. Whatever has happened, it is over, finished. Whether it was painful or pleasant, nothing whatsoever remains of either. Whether it be happiness or misery, both are the same. Neither is lasting. When you were miserable, you were feeling sad. Now that the feeling has left you, similarly, if you had nothing to worry about, you would have been happy. But even that happiness would not have lasted. Of what use even that happiness have been to you? So, whatever misery or happiness is here today, it will pass. Everything comes, everything goes. But from the spiritual viewpoint, if one bears suffering as much as possible, it is good. Dina asked, but why should there be so much suffering when you are here present in the physical form? On that note, we shall end the reading here today on page number 1731. Eva, please make a note of that.
Let's start next week with the very bottom line you just read.
Yeah, it was really nice. I will read that again. And I will stop the recording.